Welcome back to the ADVA ALM training video. In this demonstration, we will show you how to provision the ADVA ALM and start actively monitoring your outside plant fiber. So here we are at the ADVA ALM login page. So let's go ahead and log in here. This device has already been set up with a default username, password, IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway. So these steps will need to be done first by the user, and they're network dependent. So it really just depends on the network and the environment that you're working with. The first thing we're going to do is to go to the Maintain tab and click on port 1. This again will be the port that we will be connecting into our 100 kilometers worth of dark fiber. Then we will drop down the admin state from disabled and change it to management, and then click Set Admin State. This will allow us to make changes on port 1. Next, we will click on the Create Fingerprint tab. The fingerprint is basically just a baseline OTDR shot that the system will use to base the monitoring and the analysis off of. So it's kind of just like a day one reference point or a model to base all of our monitoring and alarming going forward off of. So let's click Start Fingerprint. This process can take a few minutes, so we'll just speed up this part here. Now we can see that the fingerprint was created. It's also important to note the thresholds. So let's click on the Thresholds tab. What we will set here will depend on the environment and the network we are monitoring, but the important thing to note here is that it's based off of our fingerprint. So through our fingerprint, we were seeing around 22 or 23 dB of loss. So in best practice, we would want to set our alarming thresholds to notify us the appropriate settings depending on the environment. Regardless of what we set here for these various alarms and their thresholds, the system will still tell us if there is indeed a fiber break. These thresholds are really meant to warn us of various swings and attenuation and such. So knowing that our span loss was about 22 to 23 dB, we're going to set our link budget alarm to 26 and our link budget warning to 24. The thresholds for fast, medium, and slow alarms are really meant to show us within the given time periods that we see below various swings and attenuation. The fast threshold may be applicable in some type of scenario where we have aerial fiber and maybe that fiber is swinging with some really high winds and we can see really quick fluctuations in loss. The slow threshold could be something where we're in more of a rugged environment, perhaps where there's freezing or something like that, and that fiber would get constrained or restricted, pinched tighter and tighter over a longer period of time, which would probably kick in something like the slow alarming. All of which would be really useful little bits of information for an operator. Finally, we'd want to set the applicable link budget, knowing the environment of the fiber and what the acceptable levels would be. In this case, we're just going to leave those defaults as is and click Set Thresholds. If we have different thresholds we would like to set per fiber, that's really no problem. We can just measure those independent per port and have each port have their own thresholds to base their alarming off of. So port 1 could have its own thresholds for this 100 kilometer link that we're going to be doing in our lab scenario here. Port 2 could have a separate 20 kilometer link or whatever, and so on and so forth. Additionally, we can set the overall default thresholds for every port if we go to the Configure tab and then Default Values. This would be useful if an operator had the same thresholds they would like to apply to all or many ports, rather than having to go into each port individually and set the settings for all 16 or 64 of them. So if we go back to the Maintain tab and then click on port 1, we can see that our fiber has been shot and completed for that fingerprint. Now we need to click Save Fingerprint to set that as our baseline shot. It's important to note that the baseline fingerprint should be reshot in the event that the fiber has been repaired or manipulated in any way, shape, or form, just to ensure the most accurate results. Now that we've saved our fingerprint, we're ready to put this port in service. We can do this by clicking on the Port Details tab, drop down the admin state, set it to in service, and then click Set Admin State. Now click on the Port Overview section here. We can now see that port 1 is being monitored with our status of the link loss that we're seeing right now. Additionally, we can see that port 1 is being monitored right now by the arrows pointing inwards to the port number 1. If we were to provision some of the other ports to be monitored, the system would work its way through checking each of these ports one by one along the way, and then those little arrows pointing to the port number would shift along with it. So let's end this second video in our three-part series of our ADVA ALM training. In our next video, we will simulate a fiber cut and show how the ADVA ALM will actively monitor and report those failures in an outside fiber plant.